Do you know what I mean? Like bringing up something that afterwards you're like,
Mm-hmm.
why did I even go there? Hey everybody, welcome back to Enough. Hey Dee Dee.
Hello.
Good to see you again.
It's good to be back.
All right, so the topic today, I actually had a personal experience that made me think about this particular topic. So I wanted to talk to you about it because I found myself doing something that I chronically do, and I bet there's people out there that can relate to it, and you might be able to relate to it too. So I had a conversation with somebody I know, and we get along great, but there is one topic that often can trigger a disagreement or trigger conflicting, we have conflicting views on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this to be true. So, but I still brought up the topic, and I didn't even do it. I don't even know that I made the conscious decision that I was going to talk about this topic. I just walked into it. And because of it, it triggered some uncomfortable feelings and got into maybe a little bit of a heated discussion. Nothing that like caused damage to the relationship. But I walked away thinking, why did I even talk about that? I know it's a hot topic. I know it's something that causes conflict between the two of us, yet I still brought it up. And so I really started thinking of the topic of like self-sabotage because I've done it continuously with this relationship. I know it to be true. I know it's a problem that we shouldn't talk about it, yet it's almost like I, in my brain, justify it like I think it's going to change the next conversation that we have. Like, let's go there one more time and then maybe it'll change. So, and then I started thinking about different ways just in general that we self-sabotage ourselves. Like, I'm going to start eating more healthy, but I'm going to buy these Oreos for my children to keep in the pantry. And then of course we end up getting the Oreos. Or I want to start a new routine that I know is good and healthy for me, but yet I add extra things to my schedule that I'm just going to try to fit them in. Or I'm going to be more organized in my life, but I still stuff things in the same place. You know, like there's these continual times that we want something different, yet we still self-sabotage ourselves so that we keep running into those same roadblocks. So anyway, going back to this conversation I had, do you know what I mean? Like bringing up something that afterwards you're like, why did I even go there?
I almost see this conversation as being twofold. One is the self-sabotage you mentioned in that relationship, in that conversation. And the other is in the actions, wanting to eat healthier or exercise. I see those as two different things. So we could go down either path if you wanted to. But like with the conversation, I feel like a lot of people would relate to that with somebody else. So one of my questions to you would be, you said you walked into the conversation. So was the person you were talking with egging you on to engage in this topic, or was it something you brought up out of the blue?
Well, it was more like I was talking about my daily activities and routines in my life. And then knowing if I add in a particular activity that I do, it then becomes the discussion, there's a conflict there. So I easily could have just not talked about that particular activity because I know it. Like it's, you know, I go afterwards, I step out of the conversation, I think, why did I even bring that up again? Like I could have easily not talked about that particular hour or day of my life. And we could have had a beautiful conversation, afternoon together or whatever. But instead, it's like I brought that topic up. And then of course that started a discussion that then started some head butting or just some frustration in both of us. And afterwards I was like, I did it again.
So how many times have we left a conversation and been like, why did I even bring that up again? Yeah, why did I even talk about that?
I do that with my spouse too. I mean, so this is like, there's sometimes that I'll say something and then the response back to me is it gets worse. Like, instead of like, I say something and I feel like it's not that big a deal to say it, but then afterwards I'm like, why did I even say that? Like, I didn't have to nag about that or bring up this sore subject. So why did I do it? And I've done it before, and how can we not do it again?
So from our training, what we've learned is the concept of power versus force.
Mm-hmm.
We have learned that we can become addicted to a certain set of emotions. And oftentimes we require that other person in order to have that conflict with us, to recreate that scenario so we can have those same feelings. And it could be feelings of doubt about ourselves, dismissal of ourselves. It could be self-righteous feelings. No, I'm right because of. It's really complicated. Relationships are really complicated. And so when we talk about self-sabotage in relationships, we really need to go down to the root of why. What is so important to us to bring up this topic? And a lot of times we find that there's a fear underlying there. There's a fear that we don't want to address, but subconsciously we want to bring it up. We want to have that conversation.
Mm-hmm. And I have dealt with this with clients before, like clients that are in conflict with their parents. There may be still a very codependent relationship there, even though the client is an adult and their parents are older. They still have this need to get acceptance from them, or feel that they are pleased with them, or that they acknowledge that they're an adult and they make good decisions. Like, this need to feel that, and they consistently put themselves in a position and they don't receive that back from their parents. But they are chronically, so this a whole topic of addiction. I love that you brought it up, because in my mind, my process of working through all of this, that's where my mind went also, is that we become addicted to getting that response from someone. And then what we walk away with, feeling like we may be addicted to being disappointed in ourselves, just feeling disappointed in general. And then we get into like this woe is me place, or this feeling of addicted of being angry, like having this rush of emotion of being angry because we feel justified in the fact that this person didn't agree with us. Or there's just lots of different emotions that we tend to be addicted to, that we walk ourselves into scenarios of in our relationships of, we keep putting ourselves in position to get that response from someone, so that we're staying in this place. And it's almost like the addiction is a comfortable place for us.
It is a comfortable place. It becomes a normal uncomfortable. It's not something we would choose to have in our lives. If you said, do you want to stay angry all the time? You would say no, but it's what's known. And what is known becomes comfortable. And so you're right. It totally becomes just a comfortable way of life. But this is kind of a complex situation to start to unpack, our relationship dynamics to unpack. I didn't understand it for a long time. I didn't understand that my behaviors in a certain way allowed somebody permission to treat me a certain way. And then that was fueling my feelings of not being enough, which is one of the reasons we're doing this podcast. And it kept me in that place of self-doubt, and then having to overcome that self-doubt. When you live there, you don't see that it's around you all the time.
Yeah, because I mean, really, you just broke down the complexity of it. And if you're not able to see that whole picture, you just see that one event that you feel hurt again. Like you're just there in that, not seeing what unravels like through it, and why we do the things we do, why we think we need certain things from certain people.
Yes, absolutely. And the whole idea of power versus force is so intriguing. And it was first introduced to us with the author David Hawkins in a book called Power versus Force. and it talks about how you approach life, almost relationships, situations, mindset, and how when you are you forcing your will on somebody else? Are you standing in your power, which is all tied to esteem, which is different from confidence? So esteem is your thoughts of yourself, how you regard yourself, self-esteem. Confidence is more in your ability. You may be very confident in a certain skill or ability, but have very low esteem. So when you are operating in that low esteem place, that I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I don't measure up, I don't think they think I'm good enough, I'm not nice enough, I'm not kind enough, I'm not loving, I'm not fill in the blank, then you're gonna oftentimes come at life with force, right? Because you're coming like defensively. So bringing up a topic in a conversation that you know is a hot button topic, is that out of I think I'm right and you have hurt me, you have damaged me, you have insulted me. So I'm just going to bring it up one more time. I'm not saying you did this. I'm just saying in the situations.
Really what I want to break down is, because I think I've been able to go through and figure out for myself.
No. But in general, But
people need to think about this for themselves.
Yes. Yeah. So why are you bringing it up? Are you bringing it up to validate your view? Are you bringing it up because there's some underlying anger and you don't have the courage to confront what's really upsetting you? And so it's going to create an argument or some strife, and then there is that release. But if you stand in your power, according to that book, and you are confident in who you are, like your esteem is strong, not your confidence in a skill, but in who you are and why you believe what you believe, you don't care what that other person thinks on that topic. Really, you may have a concern for that other person's thought around it for their goodwill,
but not for yours.
It doesn't affect you. And when you get to that place, then you can have those conversations that are difficult conversations, or even hot conversations that would normally set off an argument, but you can step away from it. You can change the way that the conversation is heading in order to maybe present a different view in a non-threatening way. So really, these self-sabotaging conversations are a reflection inside our own thoughts, our own heart, our own feelings, our own insecurities.
Yeah, 100%. One of the things I love when I really started analyzing power versus force is power is really based around love. And it's love of yourself and love of others. Mm-hmm. So that's why you don't need to be validated by you don't need validation from people by the way that you show up and you speak and you stand, and you walk forward. And you also are able to easily set up guardrails in your life so that you don't have incidents of violation. You're able to really feel confident in where you're at, and also know in love, in order for you to show up and love others well and give them an opportunity to love you well, there doesn't need to be counterforce, and you avoid situations that there will be. Mm-hmm. So I love that you brought up that book and that concept, because I didn't understand how people so easily are just, they think I'm not looking for a fight is what they're thinking. But when you're looking for validation, you need that pushback in order to like feel that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, one thing too, it is totally okay if somebody's egging you on, if somebody's trying to get you to engage in a conversation, you have complete permission to say, that's not really something I want to talk about right now.
Yeah, that's
Just say that.
To me, that's a guardrail.
Yes.
Like I'm not going to go there is what, I mean, you said it nicer, but in your brain you say, red light, I'm not going there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And don't feel like you always have to answer every question that somebody throws at you. Sometimes the best response is a counter question.
Mm-hmm. Most of the time, actually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Especially if you know you're being set up just to have somebody pounce on you. A counter question a lot of times will diffuse the situation. It'll help somebody see it differently. It takes off whatever threat or defensive-ness, if it's the right question, mm-hmm. that they feel around needing to be verbally aggressive to you.
And if it's a question that is passive-aggressive, then they have to answer their own question. If they're leading...
if they asked you a passive-aggressive question.
If they asked me a passive-aggressive question, then
yes.
by just saying, well, what exactly do you mean by that? Mm-hmm. Or how would you like me to answer that question? Kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Then they have to continue to... they have to justify their own behavior by continuing, because you actually didn't feel like you needed to defend anything.
Yeah.
You allowed them to figure out why they asked that question in the first place.
And clarify what did they even mean in asking it? Because most people, if they ask you a passive-aggressive question, they're not going to continue down that condescending path, right? They're going to start to defend themselves, and then you can hear whatever the issue was. Mm-hmm. In their hearts, in their defense. And so then you're like, okay, that's really where this question's coming from.
So early when I brought the whole thing on, you pointed out the fact that we were talking like a twofold question. Mm-hmm. So, but if we really move into the other side of it, so for a second, let's talk about setting ourselves up. Let's say we decided that we needed, for our own health, to make some better food decisions, mm-hmm. and we're not going to eat processed foods anymore, or we're going to cut down on sugar, and then we buy Oreos and we bring them into the house and we put them in the pantry because that's for the kids. But we love Oreos. And so therefore, if this was my scenario, I would be setting myself up for failure by having the Oreos in the pantry. And although it is a different situation, it still becomes this setting ourselves up for disappointment and addictive behaviors of not necessarily eating the Oreos, because we know those foods do have an addictive factor to it, mm-hmm. but the addiction of being disappointed in ourselves.
Yeah.
If you're consistently setting goals for yourself and then failing at them, you just set a new goal for yourself and you stick the Oreos in the pantry because you're just going to fail yourself again.
Yeah, absolutely. They have the same root. I think the solutions are different, though, because with self-sabotage and things like self-help, where you're changing your diet, your exercise, your mindset, your daily activities, you really have to put a system around that. Where you can't put a system around a conversation so much, but whenever it's a lifestyle change for yourself, you need to put a system around it. So you don't just say, I'm going to eat healthier. What does that even mean?
Right.
You need to define that for yourself. And then once you define what that means for you, how are you going to do it? So have a plan.
What are the parameters around that?
Yes. What does breakfast look like? What does lunch look like? The meal itself, the time you eat, the frequency you eat. Do you do intermittent fasting or not? There's so many things you can say, this is going to help me achieve my goal. Mm-hmm. In this particular area. And so I think when it comes to self-sabotage, definitely they have the same root. Most of our issues in life have that same root, but the system around it is what's going to change for those habits in your life.
And and the reason I even like tied this all together is because I like when we start calling things what it is, you know? And so when I've been able to see things afterwards, then I can go, and I just self-sabotage myself. And then why? But looking at different times in my life that I do set myself up for failure. And then all of a sudden I have a hiccup and I can't sit there and go, why did this happen to me? This always happens to me, or somebody's out to get me, or, I'm so stupid, kind of thing, which luckily I don't have that self-talk in my head, but yet being able to say, that was a self-sabotage. Why did I do it? And how can I, whether it is creating a system, because even when the examples that I put down, like organization, people that are being unorganized, there's a system, our routines, a system, our diet and our exercise regimen, you do need a system. So you're totally right. But being able to look at where after something happens, instead of being like, this just always happens to me, being able to recognize where the self-sabotage is in that and just think, why do I do that? Why do I do the things I do? And starting to address those emotions that I get out of it. Where is the payoff? I mean, there's always a payoff to what we do.
Yes.
So what is the payoff? And then how can I make changes so that doesn't have to continue to be my story?
I love that you're calling it self-sabotage because it takes off all the excuses and all the finger pointing. And then it gives you the power to make the change. Like, you're not a victim to whatever happened. You're not a victim to that other person. You're not a victim to that conversation. You're not a victim to your impulses or cravings or anything else. Like, you own it. And if you own it, then you have the power to change it. So I love that you're saying, let's call it what it is, self-sabotage, and then move on from there and looking at, why did I do it? And how can I avoid doing it again? So with the conversation, one way I would say to avoid the heatedness of the conversation, the anger out of the conversation, ask yourself, what is the point of having this conversation? And then that's going to drive where you take the conversation. But we talked about the other things, what is getting a system. And that doesn't mean you have to buy a system. No. It doesn't mean you have to buy a healthcare system. It doesn't mean you have to join a gym and get with a trainer. It's just sit down and define, what is your process? What are the parameters? What does it look like? And how do you implement it? That's the system.
All right. Well, I love talking about these topics with you because it's so pertinent to what we do every single day.
Yes.
And so if you want to hear any more of our podcasts and different topics that we cover to talk about real life and how we have had enough with continuing to set up and sabotage ourselves, please go to www.liveyourdesign.life.